closed session, which would be personnel.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and we were gonna add contract negotiations under the grounds to go into closed session.
Oh,
Yeah, we've got that 22(2)E and personnel.
Oh, and the, the two contract negotiations.
Okay. Who was the seconder?
Councillor Carver.
Councillor Carver, as the motion as amended. You've heard the convoluted motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to the agenda. The minutes of the regular meeting of October the 11th, 2002. Councillor Green.
Mayor, they look in good order, and I move that we approve the minutes of October 11th, 2022's regular meeting
Okay.
as presented.
The seconder, Councillor Wilson, on the question. All in favor? The motion is carried. Let's go to Fire Chief Eakins. He's going to do his quarterly report, which is in your package.
Good evening. I think this is the first time I've been here in presence for a long time, so good to see everyone. We had a pretty busy quarter last year, as you can see, or last quarter. There was a lot going on, as you can see in the notes there in the package. We did take delivery of our new truck, which I'd like to say thank you again for. That was really great and definitely a great help to the community. Dylan and I were working on the replacement of the pumper truck. I think the RFP is out, and we had a couple of questions about it, and we got them answered for people.
Closing on the 17th of November.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll have some more firm answers on what we'll be able to get for a truck and pricing and delivery times, because we are sort of over our limit there of when it was meant to be replaced.
How many potential bidders are there in the market?
Easily half a dozen or more.
Okay.
You've got there's a local company in the valley called Lance Body Works. They build trucks. Metal Fab in New Brunswick. You've got a big company called Pierce. They build trucks in the States as well as in Quebec. E1, I think they build in the States and Quebec. Rosenbauer build in the States. There's a company in BC called Hub Fire Trucks. Another one I think they're in Alberta. There's a few other smaller ones around as well, but there's easily, I would suspect we'd get 4 or 5 proposals back. With my suspicion.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Sorry, Chief. Any Councillor Carver?
Oh, are we ready for questions?
Yes. Chief, ready? We're
Any questions?
Well, I have 2 questions. One is about, I was just interested in the brush fires that have been listed during July and August, that terribly dry period. Why were brush fires happening? Do we know?
Just, we think one of them was probably started by broken glass.
Oh,
And then just
right,
the
we heard
heat,
about that one,
the-
yeah.
like the sun on the broken glass, and it was just so dry that it probably started a fire. And I can't quite think how the second one started. So.
Well, thank you. And my other question is about whether you're seeing any difference in volunteer recruitment with the new fire station and the new hall.
We've definitely handed out a few more applications. Anytime we have an event up there, we have applications available. We have had a couple of people join, and we are suspecting that some people will hand back application forms. So, yeah. I think the whole station has just given a huge boost to morale. Like it's easy to work up there. It's, you know, you're not on top of each other. You know, it's kind of,
And I can stick with the new station and the new truck. Morale has definitely seen a upgrade with the personnel.
Chief, the last time we chatted on the sidewalk, you were trying to find a new home for the old truck that you had to move along. Were we successful in finding a new home for the old truck?
Yep, we did it. It went up to Cape Breton,
Okay.
and they're gonna re-let up.
You made them an offer they couldn't refuse.
Well, they made us an offer we couldn't refuse, really. We got $5,000 for it, which was kind of more than I was expecting to get, really. And they liked the emblem so much on the side that they were just gonna re-letter the doors and keep the crest on the back of the truck. So there's a picture of 3 churches and Cape Breton.
Cape Breton. Love it. Thank you.
Problem.
Any other questions on the report?
Nope.
Oh,
All right.
apparently not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, chief.
Well, I might see you next quarter. I might. We'll see. Thank you.
And thank you to your members for us as well.
Will do. Yep, thank
We'll
you.
be here next quarter.
Bye.
Okay. Correspondence is next. Let's go to item 4. We have correspondence from Branch 49. Michael Brown, Royal Canadian Legion, requesting a donation.
Mayor, I'd move that council direct staff to forward a donation of $100 to the Royal Canadian Legion in support of their Remembrance Day celebration.
Okay, seconded by Councilor Wilson. On the question. All in favor?
Oh, wait, I had a
Well,
I'm sorry. I have my hands up. Thank you. So I did have a thought about that $100 was the figure they mentioned. But in the letter, it also says that the luncheon is a community event, which is hosted by both Town of Mahone Day and Legion, which suggests that that's a shared hosting role. In which case, they say that they've incurred expenses ranging from in the area of $500. So $100 seemed low to me if we are co-hosts. And I thought that $200 might be a better amount, but
If we're co-hosts, is that, this is someone else that we're giving them money towards the luncheon?
Not to my knowledge.
No?
I-
This is maybe a new, I don't know if it's a new thing.
That might just be a small T town of Mahone Bay as opposed to.
Oh,
Mayor, I'm happy to make that amendment
okay.
to $200 if the seconder will agree. I think it's a
Seconder
fair
agree?
point.
Do they know that who's, that's 100% increase?
Okay. You've heard the new amended motion for $200 to the Legion. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to correspondence. They are all listed under information items. Does anyone have any questions about any of the items 5.1 to 5.5? Councillor Kerr.
do we need to have a motion to respond to Brian Palferman, advising him that his letter will be referred to the Plan Review Steering Committee?
Which he is on. Anyway, is that your motion, Councillor
I'm
Kerr?
asking if it would be appropriate to take some motion to the right staff.
It always is.
The
So,
CIO.
yeah, the motion would need to include directing it to be referred there and also letting him know,
Correct.
if that was your intention.
Right, thank you. So I would make a motion that we refer the Mr. Palferman's letter to the plan review steering committee and write a letter to Mr. Pulford and advising him that that is the action that's being taken.
Okay. Do we have a second, Deputy Mayor?
I'll second the question.
Okay, on the question.
He's part of the steering committee. He's raised this issue before. It's been taken to the Heritage Committee, been brought back to the Plan Mahombe Committee. I feel it's just, from my perspective, wasting time on an issue deliberating upon lots of different times. So I would not be backing that one.
Good point, thank you.
Not back in writing the, oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
No, he's not gonna back
Yeah.
the motion.
So the notion of referring it to the committee.
Yeah.
Because it's already been represented at the committee.
I just think it's courteous to reply to letters when we receive them. As a matter of
So, but
course.
that's, they're both in the letters to refer it and to thank him, so I'm just saying that Deputy Mayor's only issue, I think, is not with the letter to thank him for sending the correspondence, it's just with the content of the.
So the deputy mayor could move an amendment to the letter to merely thank him.
Or this could get voted on, and if it doesn't pass, I'm sure somebody will move to just thank Brian for his correspondence.
Hmm,
Well, I may change my motion if I may,
yes, please.
to simply write a letter to thank him for it because it's going to come up again under the committee reports from the Heritage Advisory Committee.
And second that.
Deputy mayor seconds the motion. On the question, round and round. All in favor?
Yes.
That motion is carried as well. Anything else from the correspondence?
Yes.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm just wondering if there's anything that needs doing from us on item 5.5, given Rosemary's eloquent defense of the crosswalk as it is with some added embellishments. Because what the lady was asked, if I read her correctly, what she's saying is it's too safe and she's become complacent. And we need to make her less complacent, which I don't think is really our job to do. So I think that the added signage to make people more aware is totally appropriate. I don't know quite how to do that.
Traffic advisor?
Yeah, so, having heard all these concerns, I think the two things that staff were contemplating were only to provide additional notification signage to people, either the users of the trail or the motorists. And I think that what was referenced earlier in terms of, trying to put additional highlighting sign coming up Main Street. We'll have to work with Jonathan on, is it moving a sign? Is it an additional sign? What does that look like? And then I definitely was expecting that we put something, just, stop and look both directions before pressing the button, or dismount your bicycle, because I've heard some people are crossing on their bicycle, which obviously is not, that's not the safe way to use the crosswalk. So we would look to both of those things. I think the fact that council would make a motion, it's not necessary to have us do that. But because he received correspondence, I think it would be significant for council to provide direction to staff. So you could even phrase it in that, the traffic authority review signage at the Long Hill crossing and make the necessary improvements. And at least that way it's coming from council.
Happy to make that motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. You heard the motion? You on the
A
question?
comment, yes, thank you. There's a similar kind of situation on the Hammonds Plains Road when you're coming from Bedford towards Hammonds Plains, where the stop sign is hidden and you can't see it, and there's a very effective sign ahead of it that always grabs my attention, and as we've heard, it's the size of it and the depiction of a stop sign that's coming up. So you're very, very aware before you actually get there. So I think that
Food for thought. Thank you, Councillor Carver.
Right.
On the motion, Deputy Mayor.
So just wanted to make a comment that I do agree with all these things, but in terms of a community narrative, there's also an erroneous narrative whereby we're giving people who are in vehicles a pass on going too fast there. I drive there every day, and if you're at 40 or 50, you can stop when you're taking that time. If you're over that speed limit, then it becomes a risk. I think there's a lot of folks who are going there too fast, And the narrative on Facebook, from my perspective, is trying to support that that's a good way for us to be driving around Mahone Bay. I don't think that's what we want. So yes, we can put all the signs, but also the community needs to understand we're trying to slow things down. So in terms of the narrative in the community, if I see somebody going fast and they almost hit somebody, I won't dress down the person who was almost hit. I will talk to the driver not to be driving as fast. So there's an element of us giving priority to driving much more than pedestrians and motorists. So maybe there's something there for the PAB to recommend more strict follow-up by the police. Give a few tickets there.
Councillor Keenan?
I think last month we did have some success in dealing with the province and receiving, permission to reduce the speeds on Pleasant and Fobo Road. Unfortunately, the province did not give us permission to reduce speeds on Main Street and Edgewater. So I do think there's an opportunity for us to communicate that when the 40-kilometer-an-hour signs get rolled out here later on in the year. And again, I think that's something else we can put on our list of odds and ends to talk about with the MLA the next time we do that in the new year. That, we're going to take our small wins where we can find it. We are disappointed that we weren't given any latitude to reduce that speed, because I think that would have been part of the solution if we had that tool in the toolbox, but we don't, so we can't. So it's going to be 50 kilometers an hour, and there's not much we can do about it from our vantage point.
Councillor now.
I agree, and I mentioned this when we said about the speeding, lowering it. That's only gonna be effective if we up the enforcement. So I think we actually have to make sure that we get the police on board to enforce more stringent rules within the town.
At today's police advisory board meeting, the statistics from Pleasant Street were introduced. And they had a set of statistics for vehicles going up Pleasant Street and another set that they had for the vehicles coming down Pleasant Street. And the average speed was less than 40. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't the odd car that's doing 55 or 60 or even more. But the suggestion was, given the distance between the stop sign at Fairmont Street and Fobo Road, it was difficult. It was discussed as being difficult to really get your car going unless you're really intent to do it more than 50 kilometers an hour in that distance. So, I mean, that's little solace to the citizens who are watching the cars seemingly going up the street quickly, but that was the result of the monitoring of the speed of the cars. I was quite surprised.
Now, the recommended speed we should note for side streets is 30. So that's sort of, even though 40 is what we have permission to reduce to, our
Yeah.
goal with respect to the side streets has been to keep the speed below 30 generally. So it's when it's between 30 and 40 that speed humps are usually indicated. That's,
Yeah.
trying to lower it below 40.
And early November, the speed humps are going in on Pleasant
Second
Street?
week of November,
Second
it should be
week of
going
November.
in, yeah, and we'll have some notices going out both to the specific residents tomorrow and then everyone in the newsletter the following.
Those are modified ones, not like we have on.
Yeah, it's the first time for the contractor to do the
gentle.
cushions
Yeah.
design. But we're I think they're pretty comfortable with trying it out. They do them by hand, they do the shape them by hand, so we'll see how that all goes and then see if we notice an improved performance of those. So let us know from the fire department side once they go drive
We are
around.
going to see some issues with trucks, so.
All right. So we're finished with that, Deputy Mayor?
No,
We just
saying
have
that
to
we
vote
just
on
have to
the
vote.
We just have to vote on the one to cover her letter. All in favor? Okay, and if we can have a motion to receive and file the remainder. So, we have a seconder? All in favor? Motion's carried.
So just because council likes to have motions about writing back to people, I think the motion that we had was to the substance of the improvement to the intersection. But there was, or to the crossing, but there wasn't a motion to write back to Wendy, so I just wasn't sure. if someone wanted to
Also
do that.
move that direct staff to respond to Wendy Prisnitz. The letter has been received and the traffic authority will
Investigate.
investigate.
Okay, do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Wilson, on that question, all in favor? Motion's carried. And we had a motion to receive and file, so let's go to staff reports. It's the end of the month. CAO was on the burner.
Well, as usual, there's a 42-page report there, but if anybody has any questions, happy to take them. And of course, it doesn't always have to be now. If you have questions after the fact, you can send them along then as well. We're still plodding along, I guess. It's,
Just out of curiosity, if a citizen who's at home was to look at the council package, they see this report as well?
yeah, they should. Yeah.
Can they write to you if they have a question on one of the items that's in the report?
Yeah, if anybody gets as far as that and they have a question, we do occasionally get questions from people going through.
Okay. Okay, anyone have a question for the CAO? Councillor Carver.
I do have a question from the finance section. And it's number 4, and the reference to the audit. And I'm just wondering where we are with the audit, and also she referred to hoofs. Capital O, lowercase o, F, S, hoofs.
So Joe might know what this one, but that's out of service or out of scope. So this is the out of scope fees for the.
Out
yeah.
of scope.
So yeah, I mean, the audit work, like the actual in office, or at least most of it's done remotely now, work is done. As far as I had asked Ashley, do we have a specific time frame that I could report saying when we will be scheduling an audit and finance committee to receive draft statements? No, she wasn't confident enough where Deloitte is to schedule a date, but you know, I think at this point it's just a matter of weeks. No other issues have arisen. One of the things she's been really keen on, given the issues last year, has been to go back and forth with DMA, getting very specific, you know, questions like, is this how you want this done? Is this going to satisfy your requirements? Just so that we don't have surprises this time around. So the out of scope fees are concerning, obviously. You know, I think we did figure this would kind of be a transitional year, and that her hope would be that the following year, which would be the 3rd year of our current contract, they would come in pretty close to on what they'd originally quoted, or at least if they're looking for a further extension under this contract, which we have the right to do, we'd need to see those fees coming down closer to what was originally bid. And beyond the 11,000 quoted there, the intention is to have everything pre-approved. So, you know, we should be able to report back to you if there's any more. But we just want to be transparent about that this year because it did catch us by surprise last year.
And
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I'm just wanted to ask about the water utility, and I don't know, whether these are new numbers or these are the same as the last report. But in any case, I was just wondering what the state of play is with regard to losses on the water utility.
Yeah, this is still Q1. I did have a conversation with Scott. He just didn't get the Q2 numbers together in time for this. It should be Q2 by now. This should be the one where those are introduced. So those will be on next month, as far as I know. A lot of the smaller leaks have been addressed. We've had some good compliance from residents with the lateral replacement. Because you all know a lot of the leaking is in laterals, and so it tends to be the responsibility of the property owner to address them. But because it's not showing up on their meter, it's showing up on our side, and they're not that motivated. So that's where most of the leaks happen. And we've been, Scott's been pretty good with following up with people, trying to make sure, sometimes having to help connect them with plumbers. And we even had one instance where we had 2 leaks in 2 neighboring homes, and one guy said he couldn't get a plumber and the other guy got a plumber. So while the plumber was on site, Scott walked him over to the other property and said, here's the plumber. So it's been working, but we do need to, in the fall, we normally would go through the step testing again and kind of come back with another update report on like, how does the snapshot now compare to the snapshot this time last year? And because we're still short-staffed, I know he's struggling to get that together, but we did go over it today, and there is an intention of providing a date. And then obviously, we come to a point where we can't really do much more in terms of leak addressing after November because of the weather. So it may be that he'll provide that report over the winter. And the big question will be, of course, if we have some of the major capital work that's planned next year, does it eliminate a lot of those leaks? And we will have some choices to make about replacing laterals during that project. So we want to come back to that. I know that in the past, the town has not always done all of the laterals when we're doing a new line. And if that's where the leaks are, we may wish to be more proactive in lateral replacement. Anyway, so that's a long answer to your question.
That's fine, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? No. CAO number 5 in the finance managers, the Riverport Electric. How does the increment, the 34% that we're pursuing with the Utility and Review Board, is that a flow through for Riverport?
So Riverport has to apply and has applied for their own rate increase. I believe it's 28% in their case.
Yeah.
When it comes to the shared costs, like we both have accounted for our share in terms of how we put the cost forward to the board. So neither of us is, the only impact of our costs on Riverport or vice versa would be costs we've already incurred in that percentage of own costs. So in not going a little bit into depth, but in the rate study, there was a percentage of 6% approximately having to do with internal costs. Those internal costs do, for the most part, are shared with Riverport, except for the capital component of it, but the wages and the equipment costs, increasing costs on those fronts, but they've already been shared. So their costs also went up by the same amount over the last number of years, to 50-50 split with for almost everything right now. So they would have in their application, presumably a similar share for internal costs, but it would be their share of the same cost that we are experiencing.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Entertain a motion to accept the CAO's report. For information purposes, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Now seconds. On the question? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's go to the snow and ice control policy. Now, we're not going to need this one this year because we're outlined snow. Entire winter season. So apart from that,
So, Mr. Mayor, this was the first full winter last winter for our new, this is not that new anymore, but still new manager of Public Works and Transportation. So I asked Jonathan to review the policy. Obviously, it's good as he's coming in to get his own observations, but also there have been a number of developments in the past year that relate back to this policy. We created Park Street, which was not an incorporated street previously. The new fire station was added to our facilities. We've now completed leases with all of the waterfront parking areas, including the Parish Street parking lot. So all of those things needed to be incorporated into the document. And then council had also asked the manager to review the provisions around hydrant clearing. But in light of all of the other priorities, his recommendation was that it is appropriately handled in the policy today. So he didn't recommend a change in that regard. There is an attached policy with changes as recommended. So I'm happy to discuss that. The recommendation, as usual, with policies is actually for your next meeting. So it would be to adopt the policy as revised at the next meeting. But if there's any questions, obviously.
anyone? Councillor Carver.
I am still concerned about the fire hydrant clearing, having seen the situation last year where the snow was plowed very, very deep with very icy, heavy blocks of frozen snow onto the hydrants. And as a citizen, I noticed this happening and I was concerned because it was my local fire hydrant. And it was like that for days, until two members of the fire department came to shovel it out and were yelled at by the property owner. So it was bizarre. So partly my question is it still the responsibility of citizens to clear fire hydrants when they're covered with snow or blocks of ice?
So, I mean, the answer to that is it never has been the responsibility of citizens. However, the Public Works Department puts it below streets and sidewalks on their priority list. And so in the situation you're talking about, they were still dealing with active snow removal operations from parking areas and sidewalks, and hydrants is ranked below that on the list. Now, it does note that at the request of the department, the fire department, they will come out and target clearing of hydrants. But, you know, barring some specific reason why a specific hydrant is expected to be used, the priority still needs to be placed in order of the policy. And so, you know, if someone is dissatisfied with that and in the meantime has the means to clean out a hydrant or two, you know, because we're not discouraging that. And that was my response last time around is, you know, people can do it. And I wouldn't even say they're discouraged from doing it. There's really no harm in it. But Public Works will do it when they're available or if the fire department specifically requests it in a specific case.
Councillor Knapp.
Yeah, I think, you know, we usually put it, if you have a hydrant near you and you can clear it, please clear it. My question is, can Public Works somehow with their snow plowing, instead of plowing the snow up onto the fire hydrant,
Yeah.
somehow push it to the side of them? Because that's what's happening, is the snow's being pushed right onto the fire hydrant. So an individual goes to shovel it, and it's all ice and hard snow and everything else. So if they could even just push it away from the hydrant rather than pushing it on top of it, it would solve some of the problem.
So we could add a sentence here to that effect. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not a difficult thing to say that Public Works will make an effort to avoid putting snow on top of or obstructing the hydrants. I mean, I'm sure that's not something they're meaning to do, but Jonathan can remind them not to do it.
So I went and cleared a bunch of them on our street last year,
I remember.
and some of them were very, very difficult to clear because the snow was just pushed in there and packed in and turned to ice, so.
I'm sorry, Councillor Feen.
No, Mayor, I know going back to the budget period there, you know, Jonathan mentioned that his evaluation of the town's equipment led him to conclude that over time, we may want to replace some of the equipment and he had some other alternative snow removal equipment in mind that I don't believe we budgeted for this year, but he thought that over the longer term would do a better job of the sidewalks and this work. So, I mean, maybe it's time for us to visit that. I don't think that the town worker crew are trying to like, are they really
No.
trying to pile it on there? I think it's just a function of they're using the equipment that they have, and the equipment that they have has limitations.
The council actually did approve the purchase Jonathan recommended,
Oh, okay.
moving to an articulated tractor instead of the skid steer that was up for replacement. And,
Okay.
you know, that should hopefully mean quicker clearing of sidewalks.
Did
which in
that,
turn would
did that
mean
happen?
they do- But it hasn't been purchased yet.
Oh, yeah, okay.
He was doing up RFPs. I don't know if they're open
Okay.
now or next week, but there's that and a truck replacement is scheduled. Those two things, but the articulating tractor, so it should allow for the sidewalks to be done more quickly. Primarily, the advantage of a skid steer is in heavy snow. But you know, that anything that results in other duties being done more efficiently would allow the hydrants to be, you know, approached sooner. I think the stuff going up on the hydrants is from trucks.
It is from the truck, it's not from this,
No,
it's not from the.
it's not on
up there.
sidewalks
It's
anyway,
the
yeah.
truck drivers, they come to an intersection and they don't choose where they pick it, they just push it straight directly across the intersection
Yeah.
and. Hydrant there or not, they don't really seem to worry about it, so if they could just move it one way or the other a bit, you know, take those, I mean, all the hydrants have the nice yellow. Posts on them now, so they should be able to see them and avoid it.
Councillor Curry.
So I'm just wondering from the CAO's comments whether it would be the comments about inserting another clause should a motion be made to that effect?
Since this one's come up and we're in discussion on it, it's a time when we can take feedback, so. You know, I don't
Okay.
mind doing it either way, like we've
Okay.
introduced it, I got a note, I can come back with that change next
Great.
week
Okay.
or 2 weeks from now.
Thank you.
As part of the value, I guess, of having the policy
Yeah,
come up.
yeah.
I remain concerned about fire hydrants being covered. I've seen the one in my own neighborhood, I clear it out. I certainly see fire hydrants as more critical than parking lots. Sidewalks, well, it depends on, you know, how long ago it snowed. But woe betide if we ever have a situation where the fire department can't connect to a hydrant because it's buried under ice and snow.
Yeah.
Because we thought a parking lot was more a higher priority. So I would like to see some way to address the fire hydrants as more of a priority than what they are.
The insurance company's certainly gonna look at that and say, oh, town's responsible for excess losses.
But,
Yeah.
item 15.0, that's the opportunity to move it up the priority list if you want to do that.
15.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, certainly it would be, but it means, you know, the discussion is, does it go above sidewalks? Does it go above parking lots? You know, it's a life and death potentially issue.
So you're asking us to move it to above sidewalks?
Well, in my opinion, like, lots of times I see it up our way, that the sidewalk is getting done before the main road, and they're pushing it out that way. Cause it's, if especially if we get the skid steer, you know, get the new machine now, can they not clear the hydrant as they're going past it when they're doing the sidewalk?
I don't have a sidewalk.
No, I know you don't, but still, when that machine's out there, can they not, you know,
I'd like to see it above sidewalks.
yeah.
Or part and parcel of the move to do sidewalks, if there's a hydrant,
there's a hydrant there,
they clear it too.
exactly.
Councillor Finn.
So, you know, I think Jonathan's well aware of the scenarios, and I think he's made a recommendation to, you know, go proceed with the status quo. We've got a new piece of equipment and we come on the situation this year. Maybe last year was a little unusual, and if we think that the problem is chronic, we can revisit it. But as far as reprioritizing the, I guess, reorganizing the priority, I'd prefer personally if we have staff make that recommendation to us and we can evaluate it. And if that comes back to us, I'm sure it'll be well reviewed. But
Yep.
in the absence of that, I think it's just random, some random commentary, and I just leave it with Jonathan in his capable hands with the CAO, and it'll come back if it needs to come back.
Yeah, I guess my comment on that is, you know, there isn't any community that I'm aware of where the hydrants would be dug out before sidewalks or parking areas were cleared. I think it's reasonable that they not make the hydrants harder to access. I think that's common sense.
Yeah.
And maybe on occasion, when they're doing a section of sidewalk, it is convenient to remove some of the snow around the hydrant as part of doing that. And again, I think that's common sense. But to actually say we'll do all 60 hydrants in town before we do sidewalks and parking areas.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure people in town are going to be in touch with us if that's, so thank you, Joe, if that's the sentiment, and certainly if Jonathan has further recommendations, he will bring them up.
Thanks for that. I have a question about the list of snow and ice control priorities. Number 10 is lot 4. What is lot 4?
Yeah, so my understanding is that's the parish, so this would be, we no longer do the parking lots ourselves anyway. But my understanding is that was the parish lot of the 3 church lots in the parish street lot, I believe.
But we're not doing that anymore.
But we're not doing them directly anymore. So there's some language.
Oh,
in
We're
there.
paying for it.
We're paying.
We're just
Yeah.
Maybe
There was some-
paying for it, in my mind, means we're doing it.
There was some language in there about how the priority of those will be, you know, kind of disconnected from the rest on account of we're not the ones doing them. So
Yeah.
just so people understand is they will get done when the contractor gets done. They may get done before we get done some of our infrastructure.
In fact, it's not in the revised one. I'm sorry, I was looking at the previous.
Yeah,
one.
okay, good,
Sorry.
yeah, so we just changed it to public parking areas, and we do the one on Claremont Street ourselves, and the Legion, well, it's not the Legion, we don't do the Legion Park, but beside the Legion on Pond.
Okay,
So there's no conclusion to this conversation until next meeting, but if we're good to move on, and
all right. Let's go to potential disposal of the old fire hall.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will note here that there is a recommendation provided to accept this report for information. Council has been provided with the valuation letter that was prepared by Turner Drake, but obviously that is confidential, having to do with the potential sale of municipal property. So that would be an item for closed session discussion. So I will take any questions on this now, but I just want to know council will continue discussion on the contents of the valuation report in closed session.
Comments? Deputy Mayor.
So in this report, it indicates the previously mentioned, yes, cost of building a new garage. But I do believe that Councillor Wilson had mentioned the idea of exploring a different kind of construction, and I was sort of wondering whether that idea was explored or not.
So there will be and I'm sorry it wasn't available yet, but there will be a more complete report from Yost Architects Limited. So yeah, I mean, essentially the process of pre-design is for Public Works to lay out all of the things that they do with their current facility and what they would like to be able to do with a facility. And then for the consultant to recommend the best approach for that. There are some options that, you know, are kind of raised and discussed and choices made between Public Works and the architect in that process. What will be presented will certainly speak to why they're making certain recommendations, whether alternatives were considered and why they're presenting the alternatives that they are. It's not intended to be a kind of a roundup of different options, because at the end of the day, if we're going to build a new Public Works facility, we should be building it relative to the needs of the department, not working backwards from a budget. But council should understand what the department's needs are resulting in, and has the opportunity to then work with the architect and say, take that out, take this out, try this in a different way. You know, that's all stuff that would really be necessary before we move to some kind of tender for design and build of the actual facility. But ultimately, I think, you know, for the estimation purposes, it's not, we're not going to get a facility that will serve the Public Works Department for the next 30 years for a discount, right? It's a substantial project. And that's really the caution here, is that, you know, when we went over the numbers with them and went over what we need, and they can go as bare bones as they can to even just provide a contemporary version of what we've got back here. But it's not going to be affordable. Things are less affordable now than they've been for a long time. They quoted a provincial project recently at the Department of Transportation, I think, at $630 a square foot. Like, these are astronomical pricing kind of times.
Remember what I said about government project.
Yeah,
8 hours ago.
So, yeah, I think, you know, the report forthcoming will be much more of a dive into different options and why they're recommending what they're recommending. But I think we're confident at this point that it's not going to be less than the previously quoted price. Unless we're going for something that isn't a, you know, permanent solution for the department.
Mayor, so Dylan, I think we're making good progress on this file, and I think the information starting to flow. When do you think that kind of more comprehensive view of the requirements and associated costs will be available, so that Ashley really can compare? I'm assuming Ashley can support some of it by comparing the overall, not only the capital costs, which are one number, but also the ongoing operating costs of the two scenarios. Do you
Yeah, I
think
mean,
that's
if-
before Christmas? That
If
kind of,
council's looking for that type of comparison, I think we could provide that to the 1st December, kind of the only 1st December council meeting. Yoast will be done their work, third week of November, I think, at this point. And then there's a bit of work that would entail with Ashley to do that. And particularly now, one of the things we're contemplating is being much more full life cycle, including the borrowing costs. So this is a project for which we intend to pay from borrowing. We're not expecting a lot of external funding for it. And so we need to be cognizant of the increases in borrowing costs and what that does to our project estimation. But yeah, I think that the first meeting, what is that, December, what are we at this year? Well,
The only meeting in December.
13th, December 13th would be, we could have, and I think we should actually have a direction to produce, like if it's a report comparing two specific scenarios, because we haven't really had council direction to do anything like that, if that's, and as what I provided here, not necessarily assuming that we are making a comparison of two specific options, because again, that hasn't been my direction.
Yeah,
Counselor now.
so in my estimation of what we're seeing right here now, it's looking better and better in my mind that we move public works in there at least for this winter, in the old fire hall.
I
Because
mean, the recommendation from the department is clear, where they are is substandard and presents a lot of safety concerns. We have a building. The only question is, will the building cease to be available to the department between now and the spring? So council need to be certain that that's not going to be the case,
in my mind, I can't see things happening that fast.
but that may be a discussion that should be held for closed
Yeah.
session, since the valuation report could have bearing on that conversation.
Okay, thank you. You have a motion, I think, in your report, a motion to accept it for information purposes, if somebody would choose to do that.
So moved.
Councillor Carver moves, Councillor Feeny seconds. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to 6.4, the housing strategy update.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is one of those reports where, I've got a bunch of stuff to say and then kind of nothing, nothing to say at the end. So the report is just recommended for information, but there have been a lot of developments with respect to the provincial housing strategy and where this puts us, and conversations with other units and some of the opportunities there. But I guess council members may wish to jump in on a particular piece and offer some direction, but otherwise I'll take questions, and the recommendation is just to accept their information.
Mary, move that we accept the report for information.
Thank you, Councillor Feeny, seconded by Councillor Now. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to 6.5, fire station community bookings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we did have a little discussion of this earlier. Staff have been working to develop a policy around community bookings. Apologies, it's definitely on me. We would have loved to have this to you before the summer break, so that we'd be booking by now. But it's been a little bit of a good opportunity to work with the fire department to get used to the use of the space and how they use it, since they're the primary user. But now we are just about ready to bring a report forward on a booking policy for those times when the department are not using the space and the town's not using the space. Essentially, we've defined a number of possible uses, ranging from emergency uses to town uses, fire department society uses. So town uses includes department purposes like training, but society is for the fundraising activities carried out by the department. Public or nonprofit uses and private for-profit uses. And a lot of the question here tonight centers on the differentiation between those two. If we said, there's emergency, town, fire department, society uses, and then everyone else, that's a straightforward way to handle it in policy. If we're going to make any distinctions other than that, we'd love to have council's direction around the purpose of those distinctions. If we're charging market rates to some and not to others, or if we're just simply saying if the fire department's not using it, the town's not using it, we're going to set rates according to market by comparing other locations nearby, and those will be the rates that we'll use. In any case, the specific rates will come back to council at your next meeting, based on that survey of other places, and then we can debate whether those exact rates are the right rates. But it will obviously be a waste of time for us to present a whole category of nonprofits with suggestions about how they can be defined and what rates they could access, if that's not council's intention. So we want to clarify that tonight. And then the other matter for clarification tonight is how revenues from rental of spaces will be used. So yeah, I'd love to have some feedback. There's no motion in yellow because really this was direction, like small d, if there was some consensus. But obviously council can make motions in this regard as you deem necessary.
Councillor Finger.
Mayor, just had some thoughts really around the second question around how the rental revenue would be used. And we can litigate the appropriate rates and the competition between different facilities in town. I think we're all gonna find a reasonable accommodation for all the different groups. But specifically to the facility, I mean, in my mind, we have one big facility, but we really have two different financings. One which is borne by the fire rate, with the cost recovery really being borne by the taxpayers who are not only Mahone Bay taxpayers, but also the adjacent areas within the fire district. And the second financing, of course, is the hall, which I know it's all pooled together, but that's really it's a town asset and a fire department asset where the fire rate payers are really not making financial contributions to i.e. the $1 million auditorium. So I don't want to make it too administratively difficult, but if you just follow the logic, I think that revenue driven from the $4 million hall, I do believe would be best fed back into fire protection services. Revenue from the auditorium would be best fed to the elimination debt or i.e. fire department, whatever the arrangement is between the town and the fire department. So I wouldn't want to burden staff with too much administration if we're only talking nickels and dimes. But if we ever did have a lot of use of the community rooms and there really was a big delineation between rate, like maybe we can just add it all up at the end of the year and actually can allocate it. Like 20% goes to fire and 80% goes to the fire department or something like that. Anyway, those are just some thoughts.
Yes, please.
So Joe, just maybe a way to kind of look at that would be right now, the building estimated cost for the year, and this is everything from insurance, janitorial, heating, all of the different costs associated with the building. $66,000 was the budget. It's reasonable to say that, about a third of that, and we can go through and figure out exactly, but about a third of that would relate to the hall, to the community spaces. If you look at it that way, if all of the revenue being raised from rates goes into reserve for purchase of equipment and things like that, then essentially ratepayers are covering the expenses related to the hall. Whereas if the revenue rates go directly from any rental goes directly to the cost of it, it would only be when it exceeds the hall's percentage, so like about a third, that you'd actually get to the point where that subsidization of the hall by ratepayers wasn't happening. So if the impulse is to avoid ratepayers subsidizing the operation of the hall,
No,
possibly.
Sorry, just so we're all crystal clear, what I was suggesting is that the revenue derived from the various rooms should go to support fire protection services throughout, and I'm not exercised over whether it goes to capital reserves or just comes in as general revenue to offset operating costs.
So then the simple thing is for it to just go directly into covering those operating costs.
What I didn't understand was that if there was some situation where any revenue generated would leave fire services and pull into town general revenue, but I think that's not the objective.
I was not considering that either
Okay.
way.
Okay,
I was just basically saying, does it reduce the ratepayers' contribution to operating, or does it leave that the way it is but contribute to equipment, which would, in the long run, reduce the responsibility of the ratepayers to cover equipment? In both cases, it's a fire service benefit.
I know you've given us a total of what the costs are. Do we know how much of that is attributed to electricity power? A rough idea.
I can check. Just give me 1 sec while we're talking. I'll check.
That could be reduced considerably. There's a lot of lights back on there that are on 24/7 that don't need to be on 24/7.
Well, I know you don't speak for the department, but if there was kind of because we don't want to turn it off when you need it,
No,
if there was some listing of that.
I mean, as long as we can turn it on when we come in to use the building.
Because Jonathan can change the presets, but we just
But,
want to make sure that it's.
I know in the truck bays, you know, half to two-thirds of the lights are on all the time. And personally, I don't think it's necessary. It's something that, you know, maybe we should take to the department, but I think there's a lot of consideration there. When we were in the old hall, mind you, it was the old hall, all we had was a little lamp back on the back wall that stayed on all the time.
Kerosene lantern.
You know, we don't need all these fluorescent lights on 24/7. Like I say, that's my opinion. I think we could save some money.
I'll mention it to Jonathan for sure.
Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I'm just curious, does the town pay rent when the town uses, like for the open house, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we don't, but if we were to determine that we wanted to, as a contribution to wherever this is going,
Mhm.
I guess that, you know, town paying rent would be paying it from general. So we'd be defraying what is currently considered a fire service cost.
Hmm.
Unless we actually break out the cost specific to the hall and pay them for the general anyway, in which case then you're just going around in circles.
You and Joe figured that out. I didn't follow that, but just in relation to booking. So if the fire department has a fundraising activity planned for Tuesday and Friday night, does that eliminate other uses?
Yeah,
So
so
they're
the
booking
nature of our commitment with the fire department, where they're covering all the fundraising to cover the capital and borrowing associated with the hall space, is that they would have the primary first refusal option. Now that has been predetermined to be 3 nights a week, and then other things will need to be booked. So if there's something where the department hasn't yet booked it and someone else does, then we're not going to cancel that. I mean, obviously, if it's for an emergency or fire department like organizational need, but if it's just like, could we have an extra fundraiser? Obviously, once we've made a commitment to a third party, that commitment will be made. So we've talked with the department about like making sure that we're checking ahead so that they get their stuff on the calendar before we're taking public bookings. And we'll just have to work out like, when does that make sense to do?
Because there are training sessions that need to be booked too, so.
Councillor Finn.
Mayor, at our last council meeting, or maybe it was the meeting before that, we approved and authorized the use of the old fire department for the flu shots, which I think is underway here the next month. But, you know, I do think, you know, given the commentary from Mr. Stevens tonight, and also we've had, you know, note from Lou Simpson, we also probably kind of a conversation with Lloyd Westhaver, and then this conversation leads me to wonder why we would continue to, like, why we would use that particular old fire hall building, especially when it's in some degree in the process of being at least, you know, decommissioned, mothballed, and certainly the lights turned off, to Councilor Announced point. So, you know, I think where this is just one opinion, but I really do think we may need to come up with some kind of a policy about whether we want to wind down that practice. And when we have inquiries, we'll certainly direct them to the Mohon Bay Center, to the Legion, or certainly make avail of the use of the new fire hall. All those strike me as better ideas than continued use of the old facility.
If Public Works were to move up there till April, we're not gonna have the flu vaccine being administered next to the snowplow. Councillor Wilson.
It seems to me that the question we're being asked to answer is, what do we do about competitive rates on these, on items 4 and 5, which are the public nonprofit and the private? I have to note in passing that including weddings in the for-profit section is kind of funny. But can I suggest that we just do a quick survey of the other facilities in town that provide these kinds of services and make sure ours are a competitive rate with theirs and under the same set of definitions?
And the service provision is equal.
Equivalent.
Equivalent, okay.
So that would be like that, from my perspective, that's market rates. Like we're just not undercutting. And that, if the general consensus is don't provide a rate below what other organizations would be charging for comparable space, then that's sort of the, do we do that, or do we provide a rate below for certain users?
Door number 8.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor.
So I agree and disagree to a certain extent, in the sense that But we also need to, I know the Mahombe Center does this, it does provide spaces to folks. Community groups that are set up and trying to figure out things, may not have the money, and they'll get to go and use the kitchen, for example. And so at the back of my mind, I know, for instance, Mahombe United as a club, conversation started off very preliminary of the Mahombe Center kitchen. We didn't have any funding to be able to rent space. And so what I'm trying to say is that don't kill creativity by wanting more money. The creativity can generate more money for the town in some way, shape, or form. And so there might be, I know we need to put policy in place, but there might be exceptions whereby there's a community group that actually needs space and we need to provide it so that they can incubate it to something different. And so I don't know what kind of flexibility we can provide to staff to be able to make decisions like that without them feeling that they're being put on the spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd have to define who had that opportunity in the policies.
Yeah.
And I know that seems pedantic, but it's, we're playing favorites if we don't have a definition in the policy.
Volunteer community group or something along that lines, if they needed a space, then we would do the same thing as what the center is doing, so we're not interfering with them, we're not competing with them, but if we get the request, then we can treat it the same way.
So it's my understanding that officially, at least, that they don't have a discounted rate for a group like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we just continue,
Can I speak? If you had something you'd like to add for council.
Well, if it was a case of an informal meeting in the kitchen, as Dylan, we didn't ask Dylan to chip in $10 for our chat. This morning. Yeah, that sort of thing can happen, and that's not what we're talking. We're talking about, ongoing bookings at discount rates, and yes, there is no discount rate.
Okay, thank you.
So may I essentially, if it was a one-off and people are trying to start a cooperative for housing, they will be able to find space once in a while before they kick off to a certain extent.
I mean, that can be the direction that we say that the rates are the rates, except that an organization that is a nonprofit could use it one time for free. I'm just looking for that direction because I don't want to.
Yeah, so if we say CAO has the ability to make such a decision, would that be helpful?
I mean, I will just say that if it says that the CAO has the ability to make the decision, I will always grant it objectively. I'm not gonna, there's no reason I wouldn't ever grant it. So as long as that's how I would apply that. Because I'm not gonna tell one group yes and another group no without any criteria on which to base that decision.
Yeah.
And this is something people can chew on. I mean, based on the general consensus, the draft I'll bring is probably not going to provide that discretion. But if you think of a way to do that you like, we can add it. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. My proposal would be the revenue use just cover expenses rather than make it convoluted.
Just offset expenses.
Yeah.
All right, well, it seems like people are generally in consensus on those 2 points, so that's great. We'll have policy and it'll take a little while longer to finalize that. Thank
So
you.
we'll see it back in another meeting.
Yeah, and
One
no
quick question.
Yeah.
If the town has a booking for the larger community room, who's going to do the tearing down, setting up for that booking?
So the costs with the janitorial firm that we hired, it includes the option that when we have a booking, they'll do the post-booking cleanup. And it's not optional for anyone except the fire department. So everybody else who books the space, they're gonna have to pay as part of their rate for the janitorial cleanup afterwards with the hall.
What was setting it up before?
So setting it up.
Requires taking down all the tables and everything from.
Yeah, so part of the agreement with the fire department is that, and then I've been told this is reasonable on the part of the department and the society, is that if there is a booking, and they'll know, that they will be able to take everything down by the morning after bingo. So if there is a booking, the expectation is that the bingo organizing folks will take it down. Now, we're not gonna do that if there isn't a booking, because that's just common sense, right? But, yeah, so if there's any concern about that from the society, they should bring that concern to me. And we can put more of a delay between bingo and the setup. The only thing is obviously there's a limit there, and I don't think that the society wants a third party taking down the bingo stuff. If that's the desire, again, that could be built into the rates,
This puts a lot of.
but they probably don't want a third party to do it.
Puts a lot of strain sometimes on the volunteer staff with the fire department, like when they hit the solar garden thing. You know, Chris had to tear it down, and then they had to set it up the next day, you know, for bingo that night. So it put a lot of strain on those volunteer hours.
Well, considering that the rentals all go back to benefit the department, I guess the thing would be for the whole rental, make sure that it's enough money to be seen as worthwhile. And so, you know, in that way, putting the rates for the whole, up, to make sure that the department sees the value in renting it. I mean, we don't want to rent it for very little and have the department say, why do we even bother? It's not even worth our time. But if somebody's willing to pay a larger rate, then surely the department would do what's necessary to bring that money
Once
in.
again, it depends on which way the money is being distributed.
And we can, like I say, take some off the top for having to do the setup and having a third party come in, like having a janitor come in ahead. But that's just less money going in the department's
Oh, like I
coffers.
say, you know, from the fire department's point, I'm always speaking from a personal view. I'm not speaking for the fire department. But I just feel that, you know, depending on where the money's going, if the money's going into fire department coffers in the reserve fund for the fire department or whatever, then fine, I think the fire department is fine with that, but if they're not seeing any benefit from it, then, I'm not sure they're gonna wanna be doing all this work of tearing down something up.
So what's been discussed here is that the money would be going into fire department general revenue.
Okay.
So that means that it doesn't go into reserve unless the department runs a surplus.
Okay.
But it will result in a surplus if all other things being equal. Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a balance there, but obviously because bingo takes 2 out of the 3
Mhm.
sort of prime nights a week, you know, we kind of had to have the understanding that there was a way to do a rental on the other weekend night of the week, or there would be no
Yes.
weekend nights of the week, so yeah.
Okay. Nothing further?
Not on that one.
We're ready to go. Okay. Let's go to the last one, the staff memo on the appointment of our building official. There is a motion in your package.
Mayor moves that Amanda S. Brooks be appointed as the building official, fire inspector, and dangerous and unsightly premises administrator effective November 14th, 2022, and until such time as the appointment is revoked.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. You've heard the motion.
Quickly note, dangerous and unsightly is a term, but as you all know, we only use them for the dangerous because we need a building inspector to be able to look at dangerous building, so. We have our own bylaw enforcement for unsightly.
On the motion? All in favor? Motion is carried. Welcome to Ms. Esther Brooks. Let's go to items from councillors. Number 1, Councillor Now, Public Works Department, use of the old fire hall.
Well, I know the CAO has suggested we wait until after the discussion in camera for this, but
That's at your discretion.
I think we should move forward. We'll see what happens. I'll move that council approve the Public Works Department move to the old fire hall at 184 Kinburn Street, at least until April 2023, to assess the feasibility of a permanent move to that location.
We have a seconder?
Can I suggest a slight amendment and then I'll second it? Can we
Okay.
take out the words at least? Just say until April.
Okay,
and then-
so just to move until April 2023
Yeah, if that's okay with.
to assess the
That's fine.
feasibility. Okay. So we have a seconder, Councillor Wilson. On the question.
This is just in the discussion. Just to note that obviously there's no way that a new public works building will be built by April, and I'm sure everybody around the table understands that. So if they moved out in April, like they wouldn't have anywhere to move into.
Well, we can change. that in
I'm just
April.
letting you know that. Yeah, thank you.
There you go. Oh, Counselor, Jean, did you have a comment?
So, like this word does worry me, because I think once again, it forces us into a situation where we're not able to have an impartial discussion on the various scenarios, because we're already partially we've made the move, we've incurred the costs, we're starting to depreciate the building, oil's getting spilled on the floor. I mean, there are downsides to doing this. I can live with it, but I just don't want the fact that the operation seems already in the building to preclude us from making an alternative decision if we come to that recommendation and conclusion. I think the other thing is like, to be frank, I mean, if they move in, they're gonna be moving in for like 18 months. And as we take photographs of the building now before Public Works moves in there, that means we're not able to market the building for 18 months, means we're not allowed to, we wouldn't be able to position it. So as you all know, real estate is often, you have to strike when the iron's hot. There's market trends, there's timing to build collateral material, and I see all of that being pushed until down the road. And, in my mind, it was, the alternative scenarios are inextricably linked to being able to monetize the old building. And the timing and sequencing of that is really important to that business case. So, I mean, this is probably, there's no really good scenario here. If the old building's in rough shape, then I guess I can live with it, but I would have preferred to have done this 6 months ago but I'm pleased at least we're moving in the right direction on the analysis, but
Thank you.
I won't be supporting the motion.
Counselor Carter.
Yeah, I'm reluctant to support the motion, partly because of the ambiguity of the possession is 9/10 of the law. And the tenancy, how are they ever going to get out of there once they're in? It's like there's no end date to it. I feel it does limit our options in considering that property. And I'm reluctant to do the vote before we have the discussion of the report that has to be considered tonight in camera. And this is not to say that I'm not concerned about the safety and the adequacy of the current arrangements, because they are dreadfully lacking in adequacy. But I would prefer to see a more tightly written motion. It's better to have the at least removed. I think I would take the whole final clause out to assess the feasibility of a permanent move to that location. So I would be prepared to consider the motion after the in-camera meeting tonight.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I would just like to request the move on the second to withdraw the motion so that we can discuss it after. Otherwise, I sense will not have a good outcome that will be helpful for all of us. I find it difficult to have that conversation with the motion at the table. I think it would be very helpful if we didn't have a motion at the table and we discuss the merits of the report we received and the merits of the decision we're making.
Okay, CAO.
Somewhat of a question to the chair. I know I'm normally jumping in with procedure. I was gonna say, would a motion to table be permitted to table to after the closed session?
It certainly would.
So somebody else can make that motion on the motion, so you don't have to wait for the mover.
To
Anybody
withdraw.
can do that if you.
So moved.
Okay. Moved and seconded, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Carver, that we table the issue till after the in-camera session tonight. Okay? All in favor of the tabling? Thank you. Okay, well, let's go to Councillor Wilson and the Rails to Trails parking lots.
Yeah. I'm lost. Thank you, Your Worship. I could make a long preamble of this about active living and yada, yada, yada. But I think we all know that the trails are used extensively by a lot of people in town. Some of them like to drive there with their dogs. And some dogs refuse to go for a walk unless they're driven. And the parking areas that mentioned in the motion are, well, one of them's just been enlarged, but in any case, they are seldom if ever plowed when needed. Occasionally, private individuals do it, and I think it would be useful to include in our schedule. So with that in mind, I'd like to move the council direct staff to include in the snow plowing schedule the plowing of parking lots associated with the rails and trail sites in Mahone Bay, specifically the parking lot on Clearland Road, the corner of Long Hill Road and Main Street, and the parking lot on Culver Road.
Seconded by Councillor Carver. Is that before or after the fire hydrants?
No,
after-
I want it before sidewalks.
Right after lot 4, whatever.
Little dog with the boots on. Okay, you've heard the motion on the question.
Sorry to have to add.
CAO,
Oh, just because we recently approved the Hawthorne trailhead parking as being used as trailhead parking. That's the tennis
That's
court.
correct, yeah.
So I know that's not listed, but I'm just thinking now that it has been approved, that it will be one of the official trailheads. Should that be included?
I think it should. Thank you for mentioning it. I thought to put in Y Road as well, but that's a little bit off the
You
track.
know, that one's unofficial for now, as far
Yeah.
as I understand.
But I think adding in the Hawthorne Road, yes, please, if that's okay.
moving seconder and everybody's
Okay,
happy.
Deborah, I'll have this.
Okay, on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Good motion.
The rails to trails parking lots will be
And
shut.
really good timing, because Councilor Wilson didn't know that the snow and ice policy was on this.
Ah,
agenda. He doesn't know that. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to 7.3, appointments to the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee. There are 4 people, I think, that are being proposed for appointment. This is to address vacancies or anticipated vacancies on the board. Do you have the list of names there, Deputy CAO?
Yes, I do. So it's my understanding that these names went forward to all of the partner municipalities. And the members of the Lunenburg County Accessibility Advisory Committee are looking for a motion to reappoint Louise Hopper for a term expiring December 31st, 2023, and Peggy McCalla for a term ending September 30th, 2025, and appoint Dylan Robar and Teresa Alexander Arab for terms ending September 30th, 2025.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Carver, seconded by Councillor Now. On the question. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. All right. Let's go to committee reports. The Heritage Advisory Committee of October the 12th. They have some motions in there.
Mayor, there were a couple of odds and ends. One of which we were informed by staff that the final paperwork associated with the registration of the deeds and so forth for the town hall has been completed. And in consultation with Kelly Redden, the committee has made a recommendation that council approve the plan of the committee for the annual plaquing ceremony. This year's annual plaquing ceremony at the town hall on the afternoon of December the 2nd for this building. As you know, it's a commemoration that establishes this building as protected under the municipal heritage preservation objectives that we have for the program.
Okay. Are you making that motion, Councillor Feeney?
Yes, I am.
And do we have a seconder? Councillor Carver, on that motion on the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. We let you continue, Councillor Feeney. For Councillor Carver.
Yes, as a member of the Heritage Advisory Committee, I would like to make a motion that council accept the resignation of Anne McPhail and direct staff to write a letter thanking Ms. McPhail for serving on the Heritage Advisory Committee.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Feeney. On that question, all in favor? That motion is carried. One more on the sheet.
Mayor, as you recall, we did speak about the correspondence on item 5.3 from Brian Palferman, who also serves on the Heritage Advisory Committee. So that we had a lengthy conversation, as you recall, on the topic that was well discussed in item 5.3. The committee, however, did recommend to direct that the committee recommends to council that council direct the Plan and Mahone Bay steering team that the subject of heritage and specifically built heritage be considered in the planning strategy process and specifically in the public consultations held concerning the municipal planning strategy.
Second motion.
Seconded by Councillor Carver. You've heard the motion. On the question, all in favor? Opposed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Motion is carried. All right, I think that's it for HAC.
Just briefly, Mayor, on the cemetery committee, if you'd like me to continue, lots on the go there, believe it or not. As you can see from the minutes, the one item I would refer council to is really the incredible mapping project that was completed by our mapping project that was completed, and Jacob had a chance to, who worked with the town throughout the summer, had a chance to bring the committee through the project. It was quite impressive, as you recall, and I'd encourage all anybody on council at large to check it out on the town website. And then I believe Jacob's left and now he's moving on to greener pastures.
His last day is actually tomorrow.
Oh, okay, there you
So
go.
it's a good opportunity to set him up.
Lots.
And also, it'll probably be another week or two before that's available on the website, but certainly when it is, we encourage people to come
Well,
check it
I
out.
guess the key themes, Mayor, is that the committee was very impressed with Jacob's work, and I think we have a very nice product. So it was a big win for the town, and I think it's going to be a nice complementary asset to the work that the community groups did on in Bayview Cemetery a few years ago. So we'll see more about that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, let's go to 8.3 Asset Management Committee. Anybody have any questions about the report that's in your package? Okay. 8.4 is the accessibility quarterly update for the July to September period. Anyone has any questions?
Well, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank Ellen for the work that she's been doing, and also, I guess, to shout out the fact that of the 5 municipalities, we're the only one who's gotten all draft complete on our different components here. So that will actually be coming to council fairly soon as the draft. This is the operational plan, action plan to close the gaps between where we are today and where we've agreed to get under the Lunenburg County Accessibility Strategy. So, yeah, it's great work Ellen's doing, and also I'm glad to see the town is at the head of the pack there in terms of our rankings. So
Very good.
she's going to put it in there, so I wanted to call attention to it.
Any other questions or comments about that report? Okay, let's go to the MJSB assignment of Scotia recycling contracts to MJSB.
Mayor, a little bit of housekeeping on this one. And I think it's really associated with the new contract between Scotia Recycling Limited and the Joint Services Board to provide services. And I believe the request, and Dylan chime in if I'm misleading anybody, is really just to assign the rights and obligations of the old agreement which would have been between the town and the vendor. But in this case, we're signing those obligations, rights and obligations, and operating agreement with Scotia Recycling to the Joint Services Board.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and it just basically because we entered into this when the MJSD was kind of in a nascent stage.
Right.
And now they would suggest doing it this way because we have the ability to do it this way.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Does this need a motion from this council?
It does need
Yes,
it needs
yeah.
a motion from each council just because we're.
Right, so there's no
undoing-
motion written, so.
Oh,
No.
No, I just,
oh, yeah, okay, yeah, they do them at the top and.
Oh,
so- okay. So that, I guess,
Yeah, I put it at the bottom, make sure you guys at least.
Mayor, I'd move that the town of Mahone Bay assign its rights and obligations pursuant to the December 7th, 2002 operating agreement with Scotia Recycling Limited to the Municipal Joint Services Board.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried.
And I think we were the third to do that anyway, so I think everybody's now.
Yeah, there's only the three that. Okay, that is the end of our agenda.
We
Is it not?
We added the policy and strategy committee.
Yeah.
Oh, we did, 8.6. I apologize. It's on that list there. All right,
And not having it in front of me,
Yeah,
I
so-
hope that somebody
It's in your
does.
email.
It's in your email now, just since we've been here,
Okay.
oh, well, okay.
because this was a
This
very
is from-
late edition.
Yes, late breaking. Okay, so I make a motion.
Yes, Councillor
From the
Kerr.
Policy and Strategy Committee. I move that council, that's the Accessibility Advisory Committee.
The first
There's another
one.
one there.
Second,
There's
one
another
next to
email.
them.
Here it is. Thank you.
Policy drafts.
Good. No,
So the motion is just to recommend the council approve the amended committee policy as discussed.
that's
That's
not
Right.
what it is.
That wouldn't be until, so the only, this would just be that, so council has this policy in front of them this evening. The only motion, coming from this, meeting would be to approve the agenda, items
For next
as
meeting.
set. So this, staff are just directed to get a,
Oh, yeah, so at the next meeting, then it will end up under staff reports,
Mhm.
and that's when the actual action
Right.
to approval comes. Okay.
so, the motion this evening, the only motion coming from that meeting is to set the agenda,
It's only the one item. was in there.
Mhm.
Oh my
yeah,
God, where is
for,
it?
set the agenda for the November 28th, 2022 meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee to include the council policy. That's the only motion that would come from that.
It's
The,
not highlighted, but it's 5.1 on the minutes.
Mhm.
I can't find the relevant document.
So
So moved.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Now. You heard the motion on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you.
so, council does have that email with the, sorry, of course, I have to go to a different folder because it's sent from me. You do have in front of you the, draft policy amendments, and those are as discussed Monday night's policy and strategy committee meeting. So there were really very few, there's a lot of scrolling to find any yellow. But under section 5.0 committee membership, there is a highlighted section that's been added in their preference will be given to town residents, and that's discussing the cases in which terms of reference might set that membership is open to someone other than a town resident. The other, another change was under public member appointment. An addition was made that, quote, public member appointments will be limited to 3 consecutive terms, except where otherwise provided by the terms of reference. And then under really the selection process that did exist before has been entirely removed as per discussion Monday evening. because that had to do with reviewing and scoring applications. So under selection process now, there are 3 points. One is applications will be reviewed by a nominating committee composed of 2 members of council and the CAO or designate. And the second one is the nominating committee will review applications for alignment of skills and interests and forward names of recommended appointments to a regular meeting of council for consideration. And my apologies, as we're actually the only 2 things now under there. My eyes were a little bit confused by all the yellow. And those are the only amendments to the policy.
And
So that
everybody
would,
will have until next meeting to look over. it.
yeah, so this will come back to the November 8th, did we decide, meeting of council. The other thing you have attached to there is at that policy and strategy meeting on Monday, there was a lot of discussion about how might really had to do with recruitment, how might that be handled a little bit differently. So obviously, a lot of it's going to come down to pretty enough from here, but you have attached a draft of like working still in the process of being tweaked, but it's just like a newsletter format. So on the front right now, again, when I say working copy, I can't stress how working that is, but why join a committee of council? And those were all items that were discussed. In fact, many of them directly from the points from the ad hoc committee. What is required to be a community volunteer? Again, as discussed from the notes from the ad hoc committee. One thing here was required to be a committee volunteer. One of the notes from the ad hoc committee was regular meeting attendance, but from discussion also came up about check for meeting frequency, because there was a lot of discussion Monday evening about understanding the time commitments and being clear about that. And then we just have a breakdown of the committees, and we have done things a little bit differently. Like for instance, under section committees governed by specific legislation, that would be the Municipal Government Act governs how and why the Planning Advisory Committee meets. So in there, it says this committee meets only when required. And the Heritage Property Act also has a lot to do with what the Heritage Advisory Committee does. So that has a line at the bottom that says this, the committee meets monthly if required. So again, the activities of those committees are governed by legislation. There's a little more breadth in what a Heritage Advisory Committee does, which is why the wording is slightly different. And then a different application at the back. It's smaller because my understanding was that the discussion was to have a separate application for each committee, so that, and I think the wording was something like to generate careful applications. So really what's being asked, please tell us about your skills, experience, and or interests that align with the priorities and goals of the committee for which you are applying. So that is where we are right now. So please feel free to take a look, but as I said, it's absolutely a working copy, but just to try to get something in front of everyone so that you know that this is what we heard on Monday night.
Your worship.
Councillor Kerr.
I just wanted to commend the deputy CAO, Maureen Hughes, for having untangled all that verbiage that we had on Monday night and having produced this information so wonderfully collated tonight.
Not to add to.
Deputy Mayor.
Not to add to more as well, but I had a question around, we talked about that nominating committee being also responsible for the yearly nominating
Yeah, right.
volunteer recognition piece. Does that need to be in the policy or?
What I understood from that discussion, but as Councillor Carver said, there was a lot going on on Monday night, but my understanding was that we weren't going to include it in the committee policy because that is of course very specific to committees, but that when the time came every year for the provincial volunteer, we could just direct that to the nominating committee because that would, to my mind, again, working copy of what's going on in my mind right now, but to my mind, that's a separate discussion from a policy that has to do with the workings of the committee.
And
That-
we are confident Kelly won't refuse.
Yes.
Always definitely.
I was just wondering if the nominating committee could be just added to the list of committees. And then it's there, and then it would have those two responsibilities, one for the,
Yeah, it could be. For the most part, the purpose of the committees there is obviously with respect to the public, but, you know, we could do that.
yeah,
Yeah, we maintain a separate list from this thing that we put up to the committee. To the public, there's a completely separate list that has things like area and town's
Mhm.
caucus, and absolutely we can add nominating. That will come up in November when you all decide amongst yourselves who's appointed to
Yeah.
what, so.
But add it to that as opposed to
Exactly.
the public facing.
yeah.
Exactly.
I'm curious,
Applications to join the nominating.
and I was sitting around this table, but when I look at it here in nice, neat, thank you, Deputy CAO. And it talks about the fact that the CAO and two members of council will identify the proposed members of committees to council for consideration. How are we doing that? I mean, all the issues around criteria, skills and abilities, whatever, it doesn't mention any of that here.
So it's essentially up to the nominating committee to figure that out. One of the discussions that we had was that we may get more guidance around how to take into consideration self-identification and representativeness and diversity and those type of considerations at a later date. And we might add that at such a time as we have it. But at the time being, I think whoever's the nominating committee will just have to use the information that's been provided by the applicants to arrive at a recommendation to council.
How do we arrive at the nominating committee?
Well, I presume
we given that?
those nominations will be done at the same time as we do all of your annual appointments, which is the month before the nominating committee would be called to action to judge the appointments from the public, so that should be fine. So in December, we'd appoint you, and then in January, so I think that'd be fine.
And I think one of the things that the nominating committee might consider is if they don't know that person, they've never met them, they can always have a chat to them.
Yeah.
And say, it's allowed to meet you, and just have a conversation, so acquainting them.
Okay.
Come up with skill testing questions.
Secretly ring.
Okay, do we have a motion going?
No, there wasn't any on this one, we just. stay where we're going. Oh, there was the motion to, you did want that one motion, no?
Yes, I honestly.
Oh, for the,
That's
what we're gonna do for the agenda for the
For
next
the
week.
next,
Yeah,
Did we get that one?
we get the motion. I've just got so many windows open
I
now.
don't think anybody made the motion. did they?
Yes, Deputy Mayor made the motion, seconded by Councilor now.
Oh, okay.
But I don't.
We're in discussion on
Yeah.
those.
Yeah, okay.
okay,
Very good.
so we're on that question. All in favor?
No.
Okay,
Thank you, everyone, for being so flexible. and having
Councilor
reply.
Your worship, may I have leave to make one small announcement, which I neglected to add to the agenda? But it does fit under committee reports in my role as the council representative to the Seniors Safety Partnership Society. So we have hired a new coordinator, Lisa Bennett, and she has started last week, the 17th, yeah, it would have been last week, so she's just early on now, so we're up and running again, which is very good news.
okay. Well, I think we did policy and strategy. That is the end of our agenda. Ta-da-ta-da. We're now going to go in camera, but before we do, we should go in camera first, end that meeting, and then we'll ask for questions from the floor. All right, okay.
No.
What?
Should-
Ask
should we
questions
do-
before we adjourn, yeah.
What?
So normally what we
We have to
do,
ask the questions.
what we do is we just go into a break and take the questions and then do the in camera because technically we are still.
We're still in session.
Okay, well, let's take the questions. Any questions from the room?
It's more of a comment.
Yeah.
I would like to say this was a very pleasurable first experience attending a town of Mohawk Bay Council meeting. So thank you to the mayor.
Somebody give her a candidate.
Yeah.
Thank you, and I, as a resident of the town and of Claremont Street, I would have to again give you kudos for the traffic calming that was installed a couple of years ago on Claremont and Kinburn. I really do notice a difference walking around town compared to other streets in town. I really say that is a success for you. As the chair of the Bay to Bay Trail Association, I want to thank you for your continued support because you truly have been a very supportive group for us and Councilor Wilson, especially with regard to those cloud parking lots this winter. That's going to be an exciting time. And I look forward to hearing the future of how things roll out with staff and council recommendations regarding that crosswalk. If there is any time that I could be part of a committee for active transportation, climate, all ages, all abilities, routes around town, I would be more than happy to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you.
But very briefly, I used to spend 4 nights a week at meetings like this in my early years as a reporter, so just bringing back lots of great memories. Thank you for listening to tonight and appreciate the directions and all the best with the. Let's hope that there's lots of space for everybody.
Indeed.
So.
And we're sorry about causing the flashbacks.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you.
do we have anyone online that has a question, Deputy CAO?
We didn't a minute ago. Let me just juggle windows here. And no, we have no questions.
Okay. How many people are watching?
9 plus this phone. So yes,
9 plus the phone.
right. So yes, and there's no one, there are no questions and there have been none since you went to questions.
Okay, it's 8:45. We'll have a motion to go in camera, and then we will take a break for 10 minutes, and then we'll continue. So moved. Seconded, all in favor,
Motion to go on camera to discuss.
we're in camera. Councilor Carver, go ahead.
To discuss 2 items of contract negotiations and 1 item pertaining to personnel.
Contract negotiation, acquisition, sale, lease, and security of municipal
2
property,
items.
and there's
And-
1 personnel.
Yes,
Yes,
So those are the 3.
thank you.
Okay,
give me a couple minutes to get us
out.
clear here.
See you later.
Thank you.
You have any additional notes for the things that are coming up?
Just 1 second, we're still